Greetings, friends. This is Chris Batts, your host of the Law Firm Leadership Podcast. In today's episode, I spoke with the General Counsel of the nation's largest financial brokerage by number of brokers and branch offices. We discussed his passion for diversity, equity, and inclusion, and how the dismantling of the Jim Crow laws inspired him to be a lawyer. We also discussed his passion to serve others and his love for St. Louis and so much more. If you haven't already, please subscribe to this podcast and leave a review on iTunes. We interview corporate defense, law firm leaders, partners, general counsel, and legal consultants. You're listening to episode 54 of the Law Firm Leadership Podcast.
Broadcasting from Kansas City, this is the Law Firm Leadership Podcast. In each episode, you'll receive actionable ideas and hear personal leadership stories of both men and women serving as leaders and executives in the legal industry. Enjoy a front row seat as Chris Batts speaks with general counsel, legal consultants, and law firm leaders and law partners at the top corporate defense law firms from around the United States.
Welcome to the Law Firm Leadership Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Batts with the Lion Group. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Chris Lewis, Principal and General Counsel of Edward Jones in St. Louis. Chris Lewis is responsible for leading all associates who provide legal support to the firm, including compliance and government relations. Chris joined Edward Jones in 2007 as a Principal and Deputy General Counsel in the legal division. He was also named General Counsel in 2015. Prior, he practiced law in New York at Duane Morris and K&L Gates. A graduate of Columbia University School of Law as a Harlan Fiske Stone Scholar, Chris is a member of the Securities Industry and Financial Markets Association General Counsel Committee. Chris serves on the board of Big Brothers and Big Sisters of Eastern Missouri. He is a member of the board of directors for the St. Louis Children's Hospital Foundation and the Missouri Botanical Garden, and is a member of the board of trustees at Manhattanville College in Purchase, New York. Chris, welcome to the Law Firm Leadership Podcast. It's great to have you on the show.
Very pleased to be here, Chris. Thanks for inviting me.
So, Chris, I wanted to just jump in immediately and hear from you, your thought process or what led you to become an attorney.
I am one of those people who wanted to be an attorney since I was a kid. And I couldn't tell you as a kid why, but the reasoning crystallized for me as a young man in my observations and reading and learning about the civil rights movement. And just the heroes of that era and how they were able to leverage the law for positive change and positive impact, not just in this nation, but around the world. And that was it. And I wanted to be a civil rights lawyer.
Who were those folks that inspired you to step into the profession?
For a lot of people of my generation, Thurgood Marshall's at the top of the list, and just the historic work that he did. But for me personally, in addition to Justice Marshall, there are other heroes, Constance Baker Motley. In particular for me, and I have a picture of him actually in my office, is a gentleman by the name of Charles Hamilton Houston, who was the architect, actually, of the 25-year struggle to dismantle Jim Crow that ended up with Brown v. Board of Education. Just his foresight in strategizing case after case around the large mosaic of this is how we dismantle this system of inequity, which started in the 1930s for him. And the irony, Chris, is he didn't live to see Brown v. Board of Ed. He died before that. But it was pretty clear that the strategy that led to that case, just the individual decisions, were all stitched together with a grand vision that was his, that started decades before I think most other people could see the vision that he had. So I have a picture in my office of him to remind me not just of working towards a purpose, but also thinking strategically as to how you get there, because that's what he did. And we all benefited from that.
Yeah. And you attended Columbia Law School and also participated in some civil rights organizations within the Columbia Law School?
I did. I'm proud to have been a founding member of the Civil Rights Law Society at Columbia Law School back when I was there. In fact, my co-chair in that endeavor is now the pending nominee for the Office of Civil Rights in the U.S. Department of Justice, Kristen Clark. She's a wonderful attorney who's done tremendous work across the country. In addition to that, I was able to intern at the NAACP Legal Defense Fund while in law school.
But you ended up at a corporate law firm.
Mm-hmm.
Share that journey with us.
So I was very focused on going into the civil rights area. But the reality for me is no different than the reality for a lot of other people, in that I bet on myself to go to law school and had to leverage a lot of debt. And in doing the math as to paying off my debt, I was married and still am married, but we were married. We had one child at the time. We now have three. On the salaries in the civil rights area for the work that I was passionate for, I would not be able to comfortably pay my debt and support my family. So that led me to make the choice, a very difficult choice, to go the law firm route. But I was able to identify law firms that really embraced the notion of making a positive impact and a commitment to community. And so I ended up at what was then Kirkpatrick and Lockhart, which is now KL Gates, which had a real commitment to pro bono work and a real commitment to allowing associates to feed that passion. So did a lot of pro bono work and a lot of legal work. It was great.
Were you able to continue with that passion in civil rights through pro bono work at Kilpatrick?
Yes, without a doubt. It was, we took all types of cases. I was privileged to represent a lot of people in need, a lot of organizations in need, in the arts area, in immigration. It was great.
Would you be willing to share with my listeners just kind of your perspective of being a Black man going through law school and in an industry that is predominantly white and mostly male?
I appreciate the question. It is in many instances solitary. There are not a lot of people who share my background. There are not a lot of people who look like me. Sometimes, many times in my career, I'm the only person in the room of color. I have been really blessed, notwithstanding that, to be surrounded by people who are filled with integrity, eager to learn, and open to different perspectives. So I've never personally felt that I had to suppress my voice or suppress who I am in the professional spaces that I have been in, but I have many friends and acquaintances for whom that was not the case. So it gets better the more of us there are in these spaces, but that's the challenge for us and the opportunity.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing. What areas of law did you practice in BigLaw? Now, I know you were at Kilpatrick, what became K&L Gates, and then you were at Duane Morris. What were you doing?
So litigation, a lot of white-collar criminal defense, but also securities very early on. Was fortunate to connect with lawyers who had deep backgrounds and history in the securities industry. And so a lot of securities litigation, regulatory matters, investigations, et cetera.
Share with my listeners how you came to consider going in-house. And was that your plan? Was that your intention to eventually be at a corporation?
No, not a little. But I think I benefited from working with two gentlemen who did what we would call in New York the reverse commute. So a lot of people start in corporations after they've worked at law firms. But these two mentors and friends of mine actually worked in corporations in the securities firms and then came to the law firm. So I had a bird's eye view from them as to what life was like in-house and how different it was from working in a law firm. And so working with them and listening to them and just enjoying the securities work, the more I did it, left me open to the notion of going in-house might be something to consider.
And how did that door open at Edward Jones?
My dear friend, Jim Tricarico, who was a colleague of mine at Duane Morris. So we moved our practice from K&L to Duane Morris in about 2004. Jim, previously to joining the law firm, had been general counsel at the financial firm Prudential Securities. Jim was solicited to consider the role of general counsel here at Edward Jones in St. Louis. And when it became clear that he was going to be making that transition, I approached him and we started talking about me joining him to help build and lead the legal division here at Edward Jones. And so prior to Jim coming, the legal division, it was a different model here. So a lot of the work was outsourced. And the idea was when Jim took the helm, to create a new model where we would build the expertise within the division itself, still rely on our law firm partners, but begin to grow. So by reference, Chris, I was lawyer number 7 when I joined the legal division at Edward Jones a while ago. Now we are up to 10 times that in terms of lawyers and well over 100 individuals in the division itself.
Hi, listeners. This is Chris Batts, legal recruiter and owner of the Lion Group. My team and I place legal and compliance talent around the United States and are known for our level of communication, speed, and strong track record. If you're an employer hiring your first attorney or first general counsel or adding talent to your corporate legal department or compliance team, we should talk. Also, if you're a corporate defense law partner or group wondering about your options for a lateral move, we should also talk. Every aspect of our process is confidential, fast, and thorough. Contact us by going to our website, findthelions.com, or you can text the word headhunter to the number 44222, and then complete the web form and we'll follow up with you shortly. Now back to the show. Did you, once you came to Edward Jones, think that you will one day be a general counsel?
Honestly, that was not my focus. And I honestly did not think about that. My focus was on how to do a really good job, how to increase value for my clients, this wonderful firm, and just the joy of working in the space with my dear friend and colleagues. The question of becoming general counsel came later, and it was one of, serious thought, not reluctance, but recognizing it from being so close to it, just the enormity of the task, and asking myself, am I up to it? Is this what I want to do?
Let's talk about Edward Jones just for a moment. Would you share with my audience kind of the scope and size, both of who you're serving and then also who you're leading in your teams?
Yeah, I'm really happy to do that. So Edward Jones is in the financial services industry, as you know. We are, I think, the largest broker-dealer in America in terms of the number of financial advisors that we have. We have a presence in the United States and in Canada. And in total, we have north of 19,000 financial advisors. We serve individual investors across North America who are trying to invest and save and plan and build for their future and the future of their families. We primarily do retail investing and not primarily institutional investing. We're a partnership. We're the last of the large partnerships on Wall Street. We're not a public company. And the owners of the company are the people who work there or have retired from there. And that's been great for us, not just structurally, but just psychologically. Working in partnership with each other and on behalf and with our clients has just been great. But in terms of the scope and expanse of the firm, I think at last check, our business model with a single financial advisor in most of our branches has meant that we have a physical presence in 58% of the counties in the United States.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's been pretty wonderful. And so for my team, it's been great. We've, as I said, I started as lawyer number 7 in the legal division, and we've been able to attract lawyers from all over the country to join into our mission. And we've built just an incredible team. And it's also been built, Chris, with a focus on diversity and equity and inclusion. So I'm really proud to say that of my legal division, close to 70% of the people in the division are women. More than 50% of our leaders are women. 20% of our division are diverse. And as general counsel, I have 3 deputy general counsels. Each of them are women and really talented individuals.
You also oversee compliance and government relations too.
I do. So all total, if you include compliance, my team is just under 700 individuals. Our chief compliance officer leads compliance, which at Edward Jones includes supervision for our branch teams. And he is just a fantastic leader as well, and has built a fantastic team there. In government relations, I lead that area as well. It is not as large, but we leverage a lot of our outside consultants and friends in that space.
So you bring up something that's definitely very pertinent, and I know it's on your heart and you're passionate about, is diversity, equity, and inclusion. Would love for you to just share your journey in this. So your personal journey, as you share about what you call the Buttermilk Group, as well as initiatives inside of Edward Jones, and maybe even how you're encouraging or requiring things of outside counsel as well.
Yeah. So let me start inside with the work that we've done with our team, and then I really am passionate to talk about the community that we have built and I've been privileged to be a part of in the industry that you referenced, the Buttermilk Club. So we've always been focused on diversity, as many corporations are. But I recall, Chris, a specific conversation with my team at the time about 7 years ago, 7 years ago, where we sat in a room and the conversation was, look, like everyone else, we have this commitment to diversity listed as one of our objectives and one of our guiding principles. But we really need to have a conversation of, do we mean it? Because it's been on the list, but we haven't really focused on the work we need to do to move this forward. So let's have an honest conversation. Either we're going to keep it on the list and really focus on it, or let's take it off the list. It's a really rich conversation where the team unanimously said, no, it's not only on the list, it's a priority for us. And that led to really intentional actions. And I use that word purposefully, Chris, because that was the theme that came out and was a catalyst for us, that this work requires intentionality. And so one of the first things we did is we wrote a letter to our outside counsel. And we have really great outside counsel all across the country. And the letter basically said, look, you are valued. We really love working with you, but we need your help. Diversity, equity, and inclusion is important to us. And so we need your help in advancing our objectives. And so what we would ask you to do is to introduce us to partners, associates, and others at your firm and bring them on board to help do our work. We believe in long-term relationships. That's our business model. And for our business, as it relates to law firm partners, we believe in long-term relationships as well. We think the better you know us and the more you get to know us, the better the service is. It was great that so many of our law firm partners stepped up and embraced that opportunity with us and have helped to deepen our bench in terms of the diverse counsel that we work with. But I will say, Chris, some of our outside counsel didn't do that. They thought we weren't serious or for whatever reason. And some of those firms no longer do work for us anymore. And for the ones that do, we've scaled back significantly. But for the most part, our law firm partners really leaned in and really helped us. And it helped them within the law firm to identify and develop the diverse talent that so many of our law firms are fighting for. But we didn't stop there. We focused also on how do we strategically identify law firms that are diverse law firms and find ways for them to do our work. And so we partnered with an organization called NAMWOLF, National Association of Women and Minority-Owned Law Firms, and identified firms that had niche specialties, small women-owned firms that do contract work, or small firms that do litigation in certain parts of the country, or IT. And we built meaningful relationships with a roster of firms through NAMWOLF who are diverse and do excellent high-quality work for us as part of our team. Our focus has been on hiring and remained on hiring throughout, Chris, and I think our numbers reflect that. But diversity is impacted by hiring. Equity and inclusion is on how we develop, how we promote, how we engage. And that work we continue to do. I think we have success, but it's like exercise. If you stop doing it, you start falling back into bad habits. So it's a constant focus for us. And I have a team that is really engaged in this work. That's great. But let me talk about the Buttermilk Club, because I think that that is also not just for me personally, but for so many of my colleagues in our industry, important work that we're doing in the diversity, equity, and inclusion space. That started, I think, about 2004, 2005, quite some time ago, when several of us who attend the SIFMA annual compliance and legal conference. So SIFMA is the Securities Industry and Financial Markets Association. And it's a very large conference every year with about 18,000 registrants, or sometimes more than 2,000. And we were in Arizona at a hotel at that time. And candidly, as we looked around the entire hotel with 18,000 attendees and their families, it was very hard to see people of color who didn't work at the hotel. And so one person said, we need to meet. And it was literally grabbing folks in the hall saying, we're going to have breakfast tomorrow morning. Let's all meet for breakfast. And at that breakfast, there were 6 of us in a booth. And some of us knew each other, and we had a really good breakfast. We exchanged business cards. We committed to keeping in touch throughout the year, and committed to every time we're at this conference, we're going to have breakfast together. And we did. And for some years, Chris, it was 6 of us again. Some years it was 12. Some years, especially during the financial crisis, the numbers shrank when we lost people from the industry. But we had a breakthrough one year where we invited the then president of the Compliance and Legal Society to join us for breakfast. Her name was Beth Dorfman. And at that breakfast, we had 70 people show up.
Wow.
And that's when we recognized, we're on to something here. And so it's not only about building the network and building the community within the industry. It was, how can we activate this for good? So we approached the compliance and legal folks and approached SIFMA, the executive director of SIFMA, and said, we've been doing this work on our own for, by that point, it was about 5-6 years. SIFMA is aligned to diversity, equity, and inclusion. Would like to talk to you about maybe creating some permanency within compliance and legal around this. SIFMA jumped in with both feet and hugged with both arms. And so where we are today, Chris, is the Buttermilk Group itself, which has become a very large network. We have a couple hundred people on our listserv. We generate work for folks and resumes and pass them on. And we have seminars at law schools and get together ourselves. But at the SIFMA conference, our breakfast that started with 6 in a booth is now a permanent part of the programming for the conference. And the average attendance for the breakfast is about 200.
Wow.
We have a women's lunch that the group sponsored that is now a permanent part of the conference. And that is always oversubscribed with over 300 attendees. We have a diversity panel, focused on diversity and inclusion, that's standing room only. And that speaks to not just the work of my colleagues in driving this, but also the work of everyone in the community in rallying around it. And it really validates not the statements that may seem to be hollow for folks, that there are folks in our industry, folks in our community, folks in the business community who really are passionate about this and really want to drive it. And when they see ideas that are worthwhile, they will not just rally and support, but do some of the heavy lifting as well. Pretty proud of that group and to be a part of it.
It's rather exciting and such an amazing story. I appreciate you sharing the details and the progress and the faithfulness that you guys have stuck it out. And where we are today, it's really a testament of the courageous that you guys have stepped into. So thank you for sharing that.
And my pleasure. And as I said, I'm one person in a large group, and I'm just proud to be a part of that group of folks. They're spectacular.
Let's transition. And I want to ask you about, so you've been in-house for 14 years, and prior you were in BigLaw. What changes and challenges are you seeing in the legal industry? So both corporate legal departments and for law firms, and kind of going forward, what have you seen?
So the world continues to get more complex and exponentially for the businesses that we're all in. It's just a lot more to do in a much more compressed period of time. Everything's moving faster, everything's more complex. And so the demands for our outside lawyers, it's just really intense. And it's not like it was even 14 years ago. It's not the traditional of you need litigation support or you need corporate support. Think of the changes that technology is driving through everyday life. And for us in firms that are focused and aligned to serve individuals, that adds a layer of complexity. And so it's not questions of how, like you need an IT lawyer. It really is how do you strategize and think through the application of law in areas where there really isn't law yet because the technology has evolved so quickly, in finding law firm partners that can help us to think through that. The example I'll use, Chris, is social media. So I work in an industry where the regulators and all of us are focused on protecting against client harm. And so we have very stringent rules around communication and the documentation of communication, retention, etc. Then comes along these social media platforms where the communication is not one way, it's multi-way. And the rules are working to catch up with it, and our industry is working to catch up with it, all with an eye towards protecting against client harm, meeting our regulatory obligations. We've all sort of solved it, but sort of. But the value for us is with lawyers outside who can help us think through that, because the law isn't settled in these spaces. So the demand for expertise in those spaces from in-house counsel to outside is just really grown, but it's not grown in terms of things that we've done traditionally for 30 years. It's helped us to discern the frontier. In-house, the work has also really changed, both for my experience and my team, but also for my colleagues that I speak to. There's a lot more emphasis, particularly at the top of the house, in focusing on that frontier and strategy. How do we meld the regulations and the regulatory requirements in the direction that we want to go as a company, as an organization, because we can't leave those behind. There certainly is a significant portion of every law division that is reactive to litigations, inquiries, customer complaints, etc. But so much of our time is focused on the future and in trying to futurecast as best as we can. It's fun and it makes the work really exciting and really engaging, but it's pretty fast paced and pretty intense.
Wanted to dive into the subject of leadership. So how do you define leadership, Chris?
So I think leadership for me is certainly about a way of being and a way of getting work accomplished with others, through others, in an inspirational way. The leaders that I've admired and learned from, and we're all a product of our experiences, help draw the definition for me. So number one is integrity. People will want to work with and be led by people who they trust and people who they believe in and people who have high integrity. I think having a leadership philosophy aligned to a purpose is really important. It is easy to focus on the work and the tasks of the work, but I think focusing on the higher purpose, back to the civil rights struggle, what are you aiming for? And helping folks to see that picture as best you can, to me, exemplifies the best of leadership. So integrity, leading with purpose, building a team, and being inspiring to the best extent you can be.
Who's inspired you?
Charles Hamilton, Houston Thurgood Marshall, but of the folks that are contemporaries, I admire all strong leaders, the ones that I've read about, but also the ones I've worked with and observed. One of the indelible lessons of leadership that I've learned from some of the folks that have mentored me is you have to find your own way. Right. So I've picked bits and pieces from all of the leaders that I've watched and admired and have tried to adapt them into myself. But my current leader, Penny Pennington is just a tremendous example of what it means to lead with integrity and purpose. She is a true visionary who inspires everyone around her. But I have no hope of being who Penny is. And so adapting to some of her traits and qualities and sort of integrating them into my way. Some of the folks I've worked with before, the two mentors I mentioned, Jim Tricarico, Lauren Schechter, very different people, but learning from them how to lead with, I'll say, lead from the middle, not from the front, to build a team, empower a team, encourage a team, and celebrate the successes of the team.
Chris, let's talk about St. Louis. So you have a passion for the city. You have a passion for community leadership. What fuels this passion to serve your community?
Well, part of what fuels it is St. Louis itself. So you mentioned I'm a transplant from New York. We lived up in Westchester County, grew up north of that, but came out to St. Louis 14 years ago, and it's really become home. St. Louis is a very community-focused place. And there's a lot of civic mindedness in the institutions here. And so part of my journey, Chris, when I came in-house was recognizing that it's difficult when you're in an in-house role to be doing pro bono litigation matters. And so for me, that passion, which has never diminished, sort of pivoted to how to serve in community organizations. And so that's what led to me finding boards that identify with my view of the world and purpose. So I've been privileged to serve on several of them. I'm currently the board chair of Big Brothers Big Sisters, as you mentioned, of Eastern Missouri, which is a tremendous organization that is focused on the results of the children that we serve. It's the children and building community around them and everything we can do to assure positive outcomes for them, not just until they turn 18, but all the way through age 25 and getting a living wage. I love that organization in the work that they do, but that is quintessentially St. Louis. Children's Hospital, which is one of the very wonderful and noteworthy hospitals in the St. Louis area. But Children's Hospital for me is unique because it sits right there geographically next to North St. Louis, which is one of the most impoverished areas in our city. And Children's Hospital, in that entire hospital system, in fact, is de facto primary care for a lot in that community. But in addition to just the quality of care and the focus on community care, there's a focus on research, and particularly research for childhood illnesses. It's some of the best research in the world. So it's great to be a part of that, to be a part of the hunt for cures for childhood illnesses, and just a tremendous organization. One of the jewels of St. Louis is the Botanical Garden, which is one of the, if I may say so humbly, one of the best botanical gardens in the world, and has been recognized as such, focused not just on the space, but also on the identification and preservation and conservation of plant life and plant species all over the world. And so that organization, too, I'm proud to be a part of. It's focused on research all over the world, in addition to the preservation of just this jewel of a garden that we have here in St. Louis.
Chris, let's transition to family. So you shared with me that you're from Jamaica and you have an immigration story. Would you share with my listeners some of that?
Yeah, so I'm the middle child of 5, and I was born and raised in Jamaica. And in New York, you would say Jamaica, Jamaica, not to be confused with Jamaica, Queens.
Right.
My father had a very successful career there, but in his early 50s decided to leave everything behind and move to the United States with his family and 5 children to seek a better life for his children. So we moved up to Poughkeepsie, New York. I was 12 years old and acclimated to just this very different environment. I remember seeing snow for the first time, or feeling weather that was less than 60 degrees. Like, what is this?
Were you happy about that, or were you not so crazy about that?
You know, as I think about it, it's hard for me to separate it from how I think about the journey for my children when we moved from New York to St. Louis. And what I've concluded is, children adjust, and 12 is miserable no matter where you are. So, but it was some culture shock, eased in many respects by the fact that we moved to a community that had a lot of other Jamaicans and people from all over the world. In fact, Poughkeepsie, New York was a very wonderfully diverse place. So that helped.
You also shared with me that you're an avid Mets fan.
Yeah.
And you met your wife in New York as well, too,
Yeah.
correct?
So my wife and I were high school sweethearts.
Which is wonderful.
She was, we dated in high school, but she was in fifth grade with my sister. And I played soccer in the church yard and like in the lawn of the church with her brother.
Yeah.
And we're all still very close. So we've known each other a very long time. We will celebrate 30 years of marriage in a couple months, but we've known each other since we were children. So yeah, we grew up in Poughkeepsie. Mets. So I am a lifelong Mets fan, which means I am forever hopeful, but always primed for disappointment.
Right.
But I love the New York Mets and always will. I've tried to switch my allegiances. It just won't work. It's the same for the New York Knicks. I've somehow managed to raise a kid who is a diehard Yankee fan. I don't know how that happened, but yeah, I'm with the Mets, and this year is going to be our year. You just watch.
There you go. You're calling it. So you shared with me also that you have a love for music. Would you share my listeners about that?
So I was a DJ in a prior life, playing. I was on the radio actually for many years and did clubs and other things, and then got to be a grown up. I still have a lot of my records, the ones that haven't been picked over by my kids. But it sort of fed the passion for my children, who each of them are musicians in some way. I have one, our oldest is trying to make his way in that industry. He's very talented. It takes more than just talent, of course, to be successful, but he's a really good musician. Who will never play music that someone else created. He always does his own thing.
Original.
Our middle kid he will play everything that other people created. He plays piano and violin. And then our daughter, she's our rocker. She plays guitar and bass and likes to create music. So it's a passion for me. And now I get to live it vicariously through my children, who all have different tastes, but all have such deep knowledge of current music and music history. It's great to just have conversations with them and learn from them.
So fun. And as the weather gets better, I'm sure you're going out and swinging a club, if I understand.
Yeah, every once in a while. So golf is my passion. It was the thing I said, okay, I need to find something because I'm not going to die at my desk.
Right.
So I love to play golf, and I am not good by any stretch, Chris, but it is a passion, and I love the camaraderie when I play with friends. Awesome. And I plan to go out this weekend, in fact, if the weather holds.
Do you try to do that around the world, or you stick more in the United States or St. Louis?
So open to doing it around the world. In fact, with some dear friends, we had planned a trip overseas to Ireland, which COVID got in the way. So we're in the process of trying to reschedule that. But generally in the United States, everyone who loves golf has a bucket list of courses they want to play. I have my own, so I'll find them and check them off the list.
Good for you. So you mentioned you're a reader. Share with my audience kind of those authors and books that you enjoy.
So I have a passion around everything written by the writer named Walter Mosley. Walter Mosley is an African-American writer. A mystery writer, I think, is a genre he would be most associated with. But he writes mystery that is deeply rooted in the Black experience and in such a very authentic way. And so everything he writes, including his grocery lists, I would read. In addition, I'm a fan of Marlon James, who is a Jamaican writer who is a professor now, I think, up in Minneapolis. But he wrote this book several years ago that won the Man Booker Prize, A Brief History of Seven Killings, which is a massive book, but it's all about Jamaica and the diaspora, and love everything he writes as well. Read other folks, but those are the two standouts for me right now.
Do you tend to read traditionally with a paperback? Are you into digital or audio?
Not into audio, but I've gotten to, they're all now on my iPad. What I realized is I was traveling all over the country. Books are heavy.
Yeah, they are.
So downloading them to my iPad and reading there, I've gotten accustomed to it. So that's what I do these days.
Chris, last question. What makes your heart come alive?
Helping other people and seeing them reach their full potential. It's just, there's no feeling like the feeling of making a meaningful difference for someone else.
Chris, it's been an honor and a pleasure. Thank you for your time today.
Honor to be here, Chris. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone who listened to this episode of the Law Firm Leadership Podcast. If you haven't already, please take a moment and subscribe. Also, we would love your feedback. You can leave feedback in 3 easy ways. You can go to the blog post on our website. You can click Give Feedback link in the show notes on your device. And then thirdly, you can text the phrase LFL podcast to the number 44222. That's LFL PODCAST. And thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Law Firm Leadership Podcast. This podcast is for education purposes only. This content cannot be used for commercial use without written permission from the Lion Group. If you like this podcast, leave a review on iTunes.